What's up? It's Debbie, and I am back with more True Crimes of Criminal Minds. Before we get started, we're going to address another elephant in the room. Last video was my bad hair day. This week, and I don't know if you can see it, but I'm having an eye problem. It burns and itches and waters, and it's red. I don't have pink eye. It does it periodically. So just ignore my weird eye today, okay? This week, we are talking about Season 2, Episode 3 of Criminal Minds, and it is called The Perfect Storm. I hope everybody had a great week. It's so good to be back, and it's so good to have you here watching, and I appreciate all of you. And I just want to reiterate a little thing I said on a little short video that I made yesterday. I am not a researcher. I have never done anything like this before in my life. Something I've always wanted to do because I love Criminal Minds, and I've always been curious about what are these episodes based on, because these are horrific. Does real stuff happen like it does on Criminal Minds? And the answer is yes, it does. And I'm very new at this. I love doing it. I'm having a blast. I love my interactions with y'all. I love the other people I'm meeting on the internet. But I am not a researcher. This is not education. This is entertainment. Let's go ahead and get started and talk about The Perfect Storm. This episode takes place in Jacksonville, Florida, which is very, very close to my home turf. A nice-looking and middle-aged woman goes outside to check the mail and sneak a smoke. Her husband is a heart patient, and she doesn't smoke in the house, and she sneaks outside, and she gets the mail, comes in, and tries to get her husband to eat a heart-healthy breakfast with juice, and no, he wants coffee, but she doesn't give it to him. So this is a situation in this home. We have a man with a heart condition, we have a doting wife that is trying to keep him healthy. And in the mailbox, she gets a package from her daughter, and she says, "Oh, Laura sent the pictures from her Orlando trip." So she opens the envelope, and there's a DVD inside. And she's terribly disappointed because she said, "Movie? No, she said it was going to be pictures." And her husband says, "Honey, technology is not passing you by. It's running you over. It's a DVD with pictures on it." There's a note in the envelope, and it says, "Having a great time. Miss you both. Wish you were here." When they put the DVD in the laptop, they see that it's a video of someone torturing Laura. And it's being done to a Billy Joel song. It's the same Billy Joel song every time, and it's Only the Good Diane. Her dad, having a heart condition, has a heart attack and dies while he's watching this video. Can you imagine? You're watching your child be tortured and you can't do anything about it, and then your husband is right by your side, but he's dying and you can't help him. Such sad circumstances. So the BAU gets called in because there have been 5 abductions, and this is the second DVD sent to the mothers of the abducted girls. They surmise that there are 2 unsubs, one that tortures while the other records it. The beginning quote is from Mark Twain, and I don't usually include the quotes. I love the quotes. We all love the quotes. I didn't think there were quotes in the new Criminal Minds Evolution, and I was wrong, and I've never been so glad to be wrong, because we all love the quotes. But I usually don't put them in because it's a little extra time consuming, But this one is so appropriate to this episode as well as the true crime case. And it is also a quote by one of my favorite authors, Mark Twain. Of all the animals, man is the only one that is cruel. He is the only one that inflicts pain for the pleasure of doing it. The team get on the jet and they fly to Jacksonville. They get there and Elle and Hotch go to talk to the mother. They need to ask her questions. They're doing the victimology thing. They have to ask questions about what kind of a person was Laura. Was she shy? Was she outgoing? Was she nice? Was she cranky? The whole 9 yards. Derek and Gideon, they go to the crime scene where Laura's body was found. And she is wrapped in plastic and posed in a very nasty pose. It's not a good look. And then JJ and Reed go to the police station, and when everybody gets to the police station, they've got their board up with all their pen pictures and whatever, and they're in the thick of things. JJ realizes that both DVDs were sent just to the mother. They were addressed to the mother only, not the father. And Reed says that the mother of the first victim went on TV begging for her daughter's life, and that the mother asked God to forgive the people that did this. So Reed says that sending the DVDs only to the mother is a message to the mother that they don't want or need any forgiveness for what they're doing. Meanwhile, a young, pretty jogger is stopped by a man in a van asking for directions. And if you've watched Criminal Minds for any length of time, you know that right there is a dangerous situation. She smiles sweetly, gives him directions, and as she turns around, she's jogging, she's got her earbuds in, she turns around, and someone comes out of the back of the van, grabs her, and pulls her in. Her mother goes on the news, begging for her life as well. And the team sees it on the news, and Gideon says, "Why weren't we told about this?" And JJ says, "Because we didn't know about it. This happened in Middleburg, which is nearly an hour away from Jacksonville and in another jurisdiction." They are puzzled as to why no one has found the victims' cars. Garcia finds out that the cars are being destroyed and sold for parts over the state line in Georgia. They trace the sales back to Joey Davin, who lives right there in Jacksonville. So they go to question Joey, and he has a gun. He watched the news, and he knew if he was caught that the third strike rule would kick in, and he'd be back in prison for the rest of his life. So he pointed the gun at the cops, but he didn't shoot them. He did the suicide by cop thing, and the Jacksonville detective shot him. His dad is there. It's his dad's house. He's in a wheelchair. Joey has lived there for the past 2 years because his dad has MS and he's in a wheelchair. His dad also said he thought he would be able to keep him on the straight and narrow if he moved in with him. Well, guess what? It didn't work. That did not keep him out of trouble. He worked at a garage, and his ex-con friends, there were ex-cons that worked in the garage. The garage was owned by an ex-con, and his ex-con friends would go there and hang out. So he was still around the culture, even though he was out of jail. He was still around all these people that had been in jail. So Gideon calls Garcia and asks her to find out who Joey shared a cell with when he was in prison. And his cellmate's name is Tony Canardo. And he was released 3 years ago. So the team go to Tony's house where they meet his wife, played by the late, great Nikki Acox. I was so upset when I found out about her death last year. She played Meg in Supernatural, and I've always been a big fan of hers, and she died of cancer last year. She confirms that Tony and Joey were in prison together, and that they get together now, and it scares her. When they're together, they scare her. And Morgan waits at the house for Tony, and then Gideon goes back to the police station. And a little while later, Gideon is told that there's somebody there that wants to see him. And it is Amber Canardo, and she has been beaten up. She has a black eye, a busted lip. She looks horrible. And she tells Gideon that she got nervous, so she went to find Tony. And he was angry at her because she'd spoken to the police. So he beat her up. Reed notices that she's wearing a ring that looks exactly like a ring that Laura had. And she said, "Oh, Tony won some money playing poker and he gave it to me as a present." But she takes it off in disgust. She cannot stand the fact that she's wearing a dead girl's ring. I can't say that I blame her. So Morgan arrests Tony after a struggle, while Hotch and the detective go inside and find more DVDs. And when they get Tony back to the station, Hotch sits down with him and butters him up, telling him that the BAU wants to study his case. "You just got us scratching our heads. We're amazed. We just really want to study you." And that did not work. So Gideon then asks Amber Canardo, his wife, to go in there and talk to him. Get in there and get him to tell us where he's holding the girl. So as his wife is talking to him, the team realizes she's not the submissive one. She initiated eye contact. She gave him an order. She didn't say, "Will you please tell them?" She said, "You need to tell them." And Gideon is looking at the tape going, "Why isn't she scared?" And Reed said, "She looks scared to me." And he's like, "No, no, no." So then they decide to ask her some questions. And lo and behold, she has disappeared. And she told the cop that was watching her she was going outside to have a smoke. Garcia, she is extremely disgusted because this DVD has the Billy Joel song in the background. It's not a track overlaid over the video. It was music that was playing during the attack. So Garcia has been working with this video for hours and hours and hours, trying to isolate the voices from the music. And she is very upset. So Garcia calls JJ after she gets the voices isolated on the DVD, and you can hear Amber giving orders to Tony. Garcia finds out that Amber was abused by her father and her brother, and that Amber went to the hospital as a teenager after a beating. And her mother showed up and told the people at the hospital that Amber was lying. So that pretty much explains the hatred that she has for mothers. Gideon tells Tony that Amber has done this before with other men. And Tony does not believe him. But it's true. Gideon knows that her father used to take her to the woods to abuse her, and Tony tells him there's a cabin in the woods. Cabins in the woods are never good. Have you noticed that? They go to the cabin where they catch Amber in the act, and they save Tiffany Spears. When Amber is arrested, she says that Tiffany will never be the same. And I'm sure she was exactly right. So now, true crime. Paul and Karla Bernardo. It's the true crime we're talking about today, and they were nicknamed the Ken and Barbie Killers. This case has 3 names. I'm fixing to say a word that does not make YouTube happy. I'm going to try not to say it very much. The Scarborough Rapist. I'm going to say SR for that. Another name was the Schoolgirl Murders. And when we get to that part of the story, it will be obvious why it's called the Schoolgirl Murders. And of course, the other name that I already said, the Ken and Barbie Killers. Paul Kenneth Bernardo was born on August 27th, 1964. He was the youngest of 3, and was born into a middle-class, financially well-off family that was not what it appeared to be. His parents are Marilyn and Kenneth Bernardo. Marilyn was verbally abusive to Paul, and Kenneth was charged with SA of his daughter in 1975. Paul did not seem to be too affected by that. However, when he was around 15 or 16 years old, he learned that he was an illegitimate child, the product of an extramarital affair that his mother had. That did affect him. And he started calling his mother a slob and whore. She became more verbally abusive. She became more depressed, withdrawn, and morbidly obese. So Paul did not like women because of that. After he found out that he was illegitimate, he started peeping in windows and SAing women that he stalked at bus stops. Bus stops, man. Fred and Rosemary West hunted at bus stops too. Y'all, especially single women alone at night, avoid bus stops. I'm just telling you. Avoid them like the plague. He went to, and some of these names are like French Canadian, and I probably am not going to pronounce everything correctly, and I apologize ahead of time. Paul went to Sir Wilfrid Laurier Collegiate Institute and the University of Toronto at Scarborough. He sold Amway while he was in college, and he was a good charismatic salesman. He studied accounting, and he also became the SR. His first attack was on May 4th, 1997, when he essayed a 21-year-old in front of her house after following her home from the bus stop. The essays continued, starting with groping and fondling and escalating from there. Between 1987 and 1992, he would go on to essay at least 14 young women and attempt 6 others. All the women that were attacked were between the ages of 15 and 21. He would also beat them and threaten them to keep them from going to the police. The FBI was called in due to the escalation in the crimes. The police were afraid that the SR would become a murderer. John Douglas, the FBI agent that the character Jason Gideon is based on, and Greg McCrary from the Behavioral Science Unit went to Toronto to give a profile. And yes, I said Behavioral Science Unit. That's what they used to call it. They used to call it the BSU. Now it's the Behavioral Analysis Unit because it's not a science. Their profile said he was in his early 20s. He was a local man living with his parents because a single man would not be able to afford to live in Scarborough, which was a middle class family neighborhood. The crime scenes were all clustered around the same area. Serial essayers have comfort zones with multiple escape routes. They said he was highly intelligent, psychopathic, and had a history of violent relationships. They had a vague description of a good-looking, 6-foot-tall man and no forensic evidence at all. No hair, semen, blood, fingerprints, nothing. Karla Homolka, unlike Paul, came from a very close-knit family. She was the oldest of 3 girls. She was born on May 4th, 1970, in Mississauga, Toronto, Ontario. 17-year-old Karla worked at a pet store after school. On October 17th, 1987, she went to Scarborough to work at a dog food convention. One evening, she went to the hotel restaurant with a coworker. That's when 23-year-old, 6-foot-tall, blonde hair, blue-eyed, good-looking Paul Bernardo came into the restaurant. There was an immediate attraction. He went over and introduced himself. Her coworker politely left after a little while to let them get to know one another. They talked for hours, then went upstairs to her hotel room. She was submissive and let him do anything that he wanted. Paul liked submissive women. Former girlfriends would say that the relationship was wonderful at the beginning, but would always turn violent and aggressive and controlling. Karla was not only okay with that, but she also encouraged it. And she told friends that she'd met her soulmate. And just in case you might think that Karla was a victim, not so. She knew exactly who he was, what he had done and continued to do even after he met her. The police didn't have a good description of Paul because all of the victims except for one were attacked from the back. But on May 26, 1990, a 19-year-old that was attacked gave a description for a composite sketch. It looked like Paul. The police started getting calls about Paul. In July, he was questioned by police and let go. He gave a DNA sample that was put into storage with over 100 other samples collected from suspects in this case. Unfortunately, it would not be tested for over 2 years. By the spring of 1991, his police file had doubled in size, with a total of 15 known attacks, more witness statements, but still no clues. Karla's family loved Paul, despite the 6-year age difference. He eventually moved in with Karla at her parents' house. When he moved from Scarborough to St. Catharines, guess what happened? I bet you can guess. The attacks in Scarborough stopped. But guess what? They started back in St. Catharines. On a romantic trip to Niagara Falls, Paul got down on one knee and proposed to Karla. She said yes. They set the wedding date for spring of 91. They lived with Karla's parents until they could afford to get a place of their own, and they eventually rented a house in Port Dalhousie. I think I said that right. I apologize if not. While Paul was living with Karla and her parents, he got a crush on Karla's 15-year-old little sister, Tammy. He would peep through her window at night and watch her sleep and do other things that I don't care to mention. And Karla broke the window in Tammy's room so that Paul could have easy access. He was always upset about one thing. Karla was like his perfect match, except for one thing. She was not a virgin when he met her. And he said that a lot, how she wasn't a virgin, and he wished she'd been a virgin. So, for Christmas that year, Karla decided she was going to give him Tammy for a Christmas present. Karla stole animal tranquilizers from the vet. She's gone from working in a pet store to now being a vet tech. And she stole some animal tranquilizers and a general anesthetic called halothane. On December 23rd, 1990, Karla spiked her sister's rum and eggnog with the animal tranquilizers at the family Christmas get-together. When everyone else had gone to bed, Paul and Karla took a very groggy Tammy to the basement. There, Karla took a rag soaked with halothane and held it to her face to keep her from waking up too soon because she didn't want the tranquilizers to wear off before they were done. They wanted her comatose. They took turns essaying her and videotaping it. Tammy, when she woke up, threw up and choked on her vomit. And what they did, they cleaned her up, they dressed her, they put her back in her room, and they hid the camera equipment, and then they called the ambulance. Tammy died at the hospital, having never awoken from the coma. The drugs Karla had used were undetectable. They did see a chemical burn on her face that was from the halothane rag, but they just chalked it up to being stomach acid in the vomit that burned her face. And in Karla's confession, she lies to the police and tells them, no, I held it out here. It wasn't touching her face. Yet she had a chemical burn from it. The death was ruled accidental asphyxiation due to alcohol abuse. No one suspected that she had been murdered. Later, Karla would dress up in her sister's clothes and pretend to be her, and they would reenact the whole thing. By now, they had their own place, a rented house in I forgot how to say it. Dalhousie? Is that right? Dalhousie? For some reason, Karla believed that Paul wanted to break up with her. So she decided it was time to give Paul another present. And on June 7th, 1991, she brought a 15-year-old girl home that she had befriended at work. Now, this girl is only known as Jane Doe. We don't know her real identity. They kept it secret. But they did the same thing to her that they did to Tammy. Tranks, helping. But in this case, Joan woke up the next day fine, with no memory of the attack, and she just felt a little bit sore. One source said that this happened more than once, but I don't know if that's correct, because I only saw that in one source that I read. A week later, on June 15th, Paul was out looking for license plates to steal. So he's driving around looking for license plates, and he sees this 17-year-old girl outside of her house. And what happened, Leslie Mahaffey had come home after curfew. So her parents locked her out of the house. And oh my God, those poor, poor parents. Can you imagine? Oh, if we'd just been a little more lenient, she could still be alive. Can you imagine? I mean, talk about tough love backfiring. So Paul saw her. Paul went over there, struck up a conversation, and for some reason he goes, oh, I'm looking for a house to break into. And that didn't faze her. She didn't say anything about that. She's asking for a cigarette. So he gave her one. Then, while she was preoccupied with lighting her cigarette, he blindfolded her, threw her in the car, took her home to Karla. They essayed and videotaped it like all the others. They were torturing and essaying Mahaffey while they listened to Bob Marley and David Bowie. At one point, Bernardo said, you're doing a good job, Leslie, a damn good job. The next 2 hours are going to determine what I do to you. Right now, you're scoring perfect. On another segment of tape, played at Bernardo's trial, the assault escalated. Mahaffey cried out in pain and begged Bernardo to stop. You know, I was a nurse and I worked in hospitals, nursing homes, and what have you. And I couldn't, even if it wasn't a patient that was assigned to me, I couldn't pass the door if I heard somebody calling out for help. I can't imagine. Of course I can't, because I'm not a psychopath. This time, though, things would be a little bit different. He blindfolded her, but the blindfold slipped, and they thought, oh no, she's seen us, she couldn't identify us, so we have to get rid of her. So Paul strangled her. So now they had a body to get rid of. And they thought about what they should do, and they decided that they needed to dismember her. And if I remember correctly, it was Karla's idea. But right then, they had a Father's Day dinner to go to. So they just left her body in the basement, and they went to Father's Day dinner. A lot of these crimes happened around holidays, which I find really bizarre. And I don't know if it was planned that way or if it was coincidence. They encased the smaller parts in concrete and dumped them in nearby Lake Gibson. However, one block weighed over 200 pounds. That's 90 kilograms. And they were unable to get it out into the lake, so they left it near the shore. On June 29th, 1991, a father and son were fishing at Lake Gibson. Michael Doucette and Michael Jr. They found some body parts and called the police. One source that I read, just one source, said that it was a couple that was canoeing on the lake. So I don't know if there were two different couples, one out in a canoe and then the father and son on the bank, or if it was the father and son in the canoe. I don't know if they found the parts in the water or the big part that they left on the land. I'm not sure of any of that because I couldn't find specifics in the research that I did. And like I said, the canoeing comment was only on one source, so it's possible that that's not even correct. On June 29th, Paul and Karla were not thinking about Leslie Mahaffey at all. They were having a fairy tale wedding complete with horse-drawn carriage at the time the remains were found. And they ID'd her from the serial number on her orthodontic retainer that they left in her mouth. On April 16th, 1992, the day before Good Friday, Holy Cross Secondary School was just letting out for the day. Paul and Karla were out riding around in their gold Nissan, hunting for young girls, when they saw 15-year-old Kristen French walking home from school in her uniform and wearing a Mickey Mouse watch. When they saw her, they pulled into the parking lot of a church and asked her for directions. While Karla was talking to her, Paul snuck up behind her and made her get in the car at knife point. The only thing left behind was one of her shoes, a lock of hair, and a torn map. The abduction was seen by several witnesses. Unfortunately, the witnesses gave an incorrect description of the car. They said it was a cream-colored Chevy Camaro. They even put billboards up. Have you seen this car? But it was a Camaro. It was a totally wrong car. This time, there would be no questions that she had to be killed. They never blindfolded her. That was from the very beginning. They didn't blindfold her. They knew that they could be ID'd and they knew they were going to have to kill her. Paul claimed that Karla was going to do it by injecting air into her bloodstream and giving her an air embolism. But what really happened was that Paul strangled her for 7 minutes while Karla stood there and watched. Karla washed her up and cut her hair. She said she cut her hair hoping to delay an ID of the body. They dumped her in a ditch. And then they went to Karla's parents' house for Easter dinner. They kidnapped her the day before Good Friday, and then they killed her on Easter. And I said earlier that I didn't know if the holidays were a coincidence or not, but in case you don't know, I'm sure most people do, but in case you don't, the Christian faith believes that Jesus died on Friday and then rose from the dead on Sunday. It's a 3-day period from Good Friday to Sunday. And that was the period of time that they held her. And again, me being a Christian, that's just where my mind goes. But I'm starting to think that this holiday thing was not accidental or coincidental. I think they planned, or at least Karla maybe planned to do this as presents for him on holidays. Kristen's body was found on April 30th, 1992. She had marks that led investigators believe that someone small had kneeled on her back. So not Paul. It would have had to have been Karla. In May of 1992, Leslie Mahaffey's body was exhumed, and guess what? She had the same exact type of bruising pattern on her body as well. Once again, Canada requested the help of the FBI. Greg McCrary, this time on his own without Douglas, went to Canada and gave a profile that was very similar to the profile that the BSU had given the SR. The crimes were now all potentially connected, but they still had no physical evidence. The day after Christmas in 1992, Paul beat Karla with a flashlight. She had 2 black eyes, she was bruised all over, and she had some broken ribs. She went back to work on January 4th, 1993, and told her co-workers that she'd been in a car accident. Friends and co-workers became so concerned for her that they called her mother. Her mom went to her house and tried to get her to go to the hospital. But according to her mom, she was frantically, and her mom used the word frantically, looking for something. Her mom tried to take her out of the house, tell her to go to the hospital, and she said, no, I have to find it. And I still don't know what she was looking for. None of my sources said what she was looking for. It's just a statement of her mother observing that she was frantically looking for something. And I think that may have been the videotapes of the assaults that she was looking for. At the hospital, she was photographed. And in the pictures that they took at the hospital, she's wearing Kristen French's Mickey Mouse watch. So she left Paul, moved back in with her parents, and she pressed charges. He was picked up for domestic violence, but was later released. And this is the reason he said that he beat Karla. He was grieving the anniversary of Tammy's death, and Karla was not upset about it. And that's why he beat her. I don't know if that's the real reason, but if it is the real reason, it's a pretty crappy reason. 2 months after Karla left Paul, remember that DNA analysis that they did years back when he was the SR? Now it's been tested. Over 2 years later, 2 months after Karla left him, the DNA is tested and he is proven to be the SR. On February 9th, the police interviewed Karla. Karla thought that the cops must have known everything, so she told them that Paul told her that he was the SR, and he also made her help him abduct and kill the girls. She told them everything, only instead of telling that she was a willing participant, she tried to say she was a victim as well, that she had battered wife syndrome, and that everything that she did was because he forced her to do it. During the questioning, they asked her about the Mickey Mouse watch, and she became pale, nervous, and evasive. And I don't know what she told them about the watch, because that wasn't in any of the sources that I looked at either. Just that she was wearing Kristen's watch. They told her that she would get partial immunity for testifying against Paul. Now, she wanted full immunity, and one of my sources said that she got it, but she did not. She got a light sentence. She got 2 10-year sentences. The 10 years were for manslaughter. They knocked the murders down to manslaughter of Leslie McAfee and Kristen French. So she got 2 10-year sentences to be served concurrently. So that means they were served at the same time. So instead of 20, it was only 10 years. And then they added another 2 years on to the sentence because of the cover-up she did when her sister died. So she was in prison for 12 years for killing 3 people, essaying. Actually, we don't know the true number. There's probably many more. I know there are 2 that other people were arrested for. One man was arrested for essay of his girlfriend and served for 16 months, and he didn't do it. And he served his whole 16 months. But later he was exonerated. And there was another man, there was a woman named Elizabeth Bain that went missing, and her boyfriend was actually arrested for her murder, was supposed to get a life sentence, but he served, I don't remember how many years. It wasn't the whole sentence, obviously, because when Bernardo started confessing, then they realized that this guy did not kill his girlfriend. Paul did it. So he got his conviction got overturned. He did get another trial, but this is the freakiest thing because this is Canada, like I said. I'm in America. I watch lawyers on YouTube with people from all over the world, and I've never heard of this happening before, ever. When they retried him, the prosecutor did not put on any evidence at all and asked the jury to find him not guilty. And that flabbergasted me, man. Flabbergasted me. An American prosecutor, I don't think would ever do that. I honestly, if they're going to be tried again, they try them. They don't say, oh, I'm not going to tell you anything. Just find him not guilty. Hell no. I have questions. I want to know more about the Canadian legal system. And again, I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm just very interested in other cultures. I'm not saying anything's good or bad or indifferent. I'm just curious. She was up for parole twice and was denied both times because they didn't see they didn't see her taking responsibility for anything or any remorse for the things that she'd done. So she was denied parole twice, I believe. And she now lives, and I apologize, I'm probably going to butcher this one too, Shadowgay with her husband. And her husband is her lawyer's brother. And they have 3 children. And she volunteers in an elementary school in Montreal. The judge that released her wanted restrictions put on her. They wanted to know her whereabouts at all times, her current address. She wasn't allowed to be around any children younger than 16. And she was not allowed to contact Paul or any family members of the victim. She was also supposed to submit DNA for a national database. But a different judge, overturned all of these restrictions. She never would have gotten the deal that she did if they'd found the tapes before she was sentenced. She got a sweet deal. And then got another sweet deal after she got out. Paul was arrested on February 17th. And when they searched the house, they found news clippings about the SR attacks, books on violent porn, and sex tapes, but not the tapes of the assaults. The house was kept as a crime scene for 71 days. That's over 2 months. They kept this house cordoned off with police tape around it. And they were looking for the tapes of the assaults because Karla had told them all these assaults had been taped. So after the house was opened back up and not declared a crime scene anymore, Paul told his attorney to go to the house, and in the upstairs bathroom, there was a light fixture in the ceiling. He said, unscrew that light fixture, and there are tapes hidden up there. Get them out of the house. And the lawyer got the tapes. He kept them for 16 months. He didn't look at them. He didn't turn them over to the police, didn't turn them over to the prosecution. He just kept them. Then, in 16 months, he withdrew as Paul's attorney because he watched the tapes. And he was like, no, I can't represent this guy. Not only that, but he got himself a lawyer. Because a couple of years later, he was actually charged with obstruction of justice and holding child pornography. He was acquitted and ordered to turn the tapes over to Paul's new attorney. When the police interviewed Paul, he said that at the time of both murders, he was out getting pizza, movies, and gas. And he had all the receipts for that, timestamped. And he said that he went home and the girls were just dead. That Karla had killed him while he was out. Karla said that she watched him strangle them. During the trial, the tapes were played for the jury, but the gallery was not allowed to view them, only hear them. Karla could clearly be heard on the video giving orders. And not only was she giving orders, she was filming with a steady hand, not the hand of someone terrified and acting under duress. And the country was outraged that she was given such a light sentence. After the trial, the tapes were burned because the families of the victims requested that the tapes be destroyed. In September of 1995, Paul was sentenced to life in prison. He was denied parole in 2018 for the same reason that Karla was always denied parole: no remorse. He has been designated a dangerous offender and will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. And that is the story of the Ken and Barbie Killers. So that's everything I have this week, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week. Have a good week, and remember, be kind to people, love your family, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Don't forget to subscribe!